Hello and welcome to another presentation of Curtis Jones writing. Uh, I'm reading out of my fourth book, which is Love Endures All Things, uh, a love story from teenage marriage to senior years. Talking about Stephanie and I. It was really a wonderful life. Not to make fun of the movie, but we all have our ups and downs, and so I'm telling the story of Stephanie and I. And the story I'm going to read today, the chapter, is entitled I'm Leaving Home. It's an event I'm rather ashamed of. Shouldn't have happened. If I had known and understood what I do now, it would never have happened. But we learn as we grow and mature. If you like what I'm doing, I have a web page here, curtis-jones-books.squarespace.com. No, yeah, squarespace.com. And that's my web page that has all of my books listed there. It tells a little about each book, and it also has links that'll take you directly to the Amazon site where my books are listed, and you can buy them in either ebook or in the paperback form. And some of them I've been working on converting into hardback books. I'm not real fast about doing that because I will need to be a lot more popular as a writer for that to be beneficial for me to switch them into hardback. But I also have a Facebook page. It's Curtis Jones author page at Facebook. It also has links to take you to Amazon. Both of these sites have links that will take you to the Montgomery Public Library. Before COVID hit, I had started doing seminars teaching people how to write and publish books for themselves. And so they have a copy of one of my seminars there, and you can go watch it. It's about 45 minutes long, so you need to set a little time aside to do that. I hope you do, and I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you write your own story soon. So let's get started. Chapter 6, I'm Leaving, is the title. The surgery was for Tuesday morning at 6:30 a.m. I had to check into the hospital Monday afternoon at 4 p.m. Stephanie didn't have her driver's license yet, but she drove me to the hospital that day. She had left the baby with mom and dad. They adored that little boy. That's my son Michael. Stephanie stayed with me until about 7 p.m. They didn't let her have anything to eat, or they didn't let me have anything to eat or drink starting at midnight, so I would be ready for the operation. They took me to surgery about 5 a.m., and I was rolled into the operating room about 6 a.m. They had given me something to make me drowsy so I could be knocked out more easily. They had removed all my covers or coverings and laid a warm blanket over me to cover my shame. I was not laying on the operating table, or I was now laying on the operating table, and I was very nervous. They were all conversing with each other, and it was as if I was part of the furniture. Shortly, a nurse came over to me and she asked me if I was doing okay and pulled the blanket off of me, leaving me on the table completely nude. I was so embarrassed I could hardly speak. I said, "Cover me back up. I'm naked." She responded that they had seen it all before. I said with more conviction this time, "Not mine. Cover me back up." The doctor, Dr. Baker, had walked in to the hearing ear range and heard what was being said. Dr. Baker told her to cover me up until I was under. I realized just then that I would be in my all together when they were working on me. The anesthesiologist came in and reminded me we had met the night before, and he told me what he was going to do. I asked him to make sure that he could wake me up when it was all over. I gave a nervous laugh, and he assured me he would. He put an oxygen mask over my face and started pumping the sleeping agent into my IV. He told me to count backwards from 100. I only remember counting to 98 before I was cold. When I woke up later that day, I was in a room full of people and nurses uh, taking blood pressure and trying to wake people up. They were asking if the people knew where they were and who they were. In a few minutes, they came to question me. It seemed very strange to me. The whole scene was like that of an Alfred Hitchcock movie. A nurse noticed I was looking around. She came over and asked me if I knew where I was and who I was. I guess I answered correctly because she instructed me to take a deep breath and blow out all I could. She told me to do this several times. It was supposed to help wake you up. I followed her instructions, and in a few minutes, I was rolled back to my room. When I got to my room, Stephanie was waiting for me and gave me a hearty hug and some kisses. And after they got me into my bed and left the room, I was so happy to see her and know she was there for me. In a little while, she called mom and she came to see me. Mom called mom and she came to see me too. I had a full cast over my leg and was told I would spend about a week in the hospital. It was the same hospital our son Michael had been born in just months earlier. I remember what that was like when Stephanie was in the labor room waiting to give birth. I held her hand with my left hand and I wore my wedding ring on that left hand. Stephanie would squeeze my hand so hard as she had contractions, I thought that she would, or that my ring was going to cut my finger from the pressure she applied when she had the pains. I tried to pull my hand back so I could offer my right hand instead, but she wouldn't let go of my left hand. I didn't have the heart to tell her she was hurting me when I could see the pain on her face from what she was feeling. The hospital held good memories from the birth of my first son and the very painful way she held my hand. Now I would remember the pain associated with the surgery. They tried to keep the pain down, but it wasn't easy. I kept up with the times, and when my medication was due, one afternoon about 4 p.m., I was in the throes of pain, and the nurse wouldn't answer the call button. I picked up my room phone and I asked for an outside line, and I called the hospital, and I was called the hospital that I was in and asked for the nurse's station on my floor. The nurse answered the call, and I told her who I was and I asked for my pain medication. She was surprised at my ingenuity and brought the dose to me right then. They'd never missed an appointment time or appointed time for my medication again while I was there. The nurse said that was the first time for them to be called from a room down the hall on their phone system. When I got out of the hospital, Stephanie drove me home. She was just 16 by this time. She didn't have a driver's license yet. I had taught her how to drive, and she was very good at it. She carried our son in a car seat with her when she drove. We were very romantic almost every day, and the big hard cast on my left leg made it more difficult for us. But we could still cuddle. Stephanie was starting to show quite a lot now. The baby would be coming in a couple of months, and we were getting ready. We had the small bedroom set up with a bassinet and the baby bed that Michael slept in. We never asked the kids, I'm sorry, we never let the kids sleep in our room that served us very well throughout our marriage. The cast was left on my leg for 8 weeks, and I visited the doctor every 4 weeks. When it was time to remove the cast, Stephanie drove me to the doctor's office, and he removed the cast. During those 8 weeks, my leg had stiffened up to the point it wouldn't bend. I was hospitalized once more to break the knee loose so that it could bend again. That was a 2-day stay in the hospital. Then I had intense therapy to strengthen the leg. I spent another 8 weeks doing the therapy so I could use the leg. During this time, the welfare department talked me into going to college. I signed up for classes and took computer science. To take the college classes, I had to get a GED. I talked Stephanie into taking the GED classes with me. Stephanie and I would take Michael to my parents' house and leave him until after classes. They lived in Keys, California, about 5 miles from Modesto. It only took 15 minutes to take him over there. Stephanie had a few different classes, and I would let her take the car because she got out earlier than me. One day I got out of class on time, and they held her class over. I was angry. I had to wait, and I started walking over to her building. It was several blocks away. I was almost there when Stephanie passed me and stopped at once. I came and got into the driver's seat. She could see I was very mad. She apologized and started to explain what happened, and I wouldn't hear it. It was our second fight, almost 3 years in. I think now how awful I was. She was big, pregnant, and probably not feeling very good, and hormones making her very emotional, and I did that. We quickly made up, and I said I was sorry. It was November, and the new baby would come in December. Everything went well, and we both got our GEDs by the middle of December. I went on to college classes, and she kept being the mother of my son and soon my children. With the holidays past and the new year underway, we settled into a routine where I went to school and Stephanie took care of everything else we needed. I drove to school early and got home about 4 in the afternoon. I only came home for lunch once in a while. Almost the end of the semester, I came home from school because some water pipes had broken and flooded my building. When I got home, I found my friend Mike's car in the driveway. I became jealous before I knew what was going on. Stephanie was always nice to all my friends. Stephanie only had my sisters as her friends. We had moved to Modesto when we got married, and her friends all lived in Turlock. She was starved for friendship after 2 years away from her friends. When I came into the house, Stephanie and Mike were sitting at the table talking while Mike ate his lunch. I didn't act upset until Mike went back to work about half hour later. Mike was a postal carrier and he was in our neighborhood this day. He just wanted to have lunch with a friend. Mike had known Stephanie a few months before I met her. He knew her through John also. John dated Stephanie for a few months before I came home. I never asked Stephanie about her relationship with John or Mike before I became her boyfriend. Because of this, my mind was a fertile field, ripe for terrible thoughts. When Mike went back to work, I told Stephanie that I didn't like any man at our house with my wife alone. It made me think of all the possibilities of what could happen. I told her I trusted her, but I didn't want to ever see that again. I suggested that she send him away if he ever came to her when I was not there. I told her it was not my place to tell my friend that it was improper for him to come there when I was not home. Stephanie thought this was the end of it, but within my heart I began to wonder how many times he may have come to stay with my wife while I was gone. I wondered just how familiar they were with each other. I imagined explicit things, and it ate at me for many months. It didn't help that the rigors of being pregnant and always uncomfortable had taken away her tenderness and desire for me. I was sure she was being satisfied by perhaps Mike on his lunch hour. It was a very hard thing for me to deal with. My heart began to build anger and frustration in my love for Stephanie. I finished the fall semester and Christmas came and went. On the 30th of December, Brian, our second son, was born at the same hospital Michael had been born at 18 months earlier. When the spring semester started, I had calmed down a little and was not so worried about the fidelity of my wife. I came home many days for lunch this semester, and one day in May, I had to stop for gas on the way home. And when I got there, Mike was there and had gone into the house. We ate lunch together, and I said nothing. We both left about the same time. Stephanie acted very uneasy. She hadn't had time to tell Mike what I had asked her to tell him. So she so she said after he left. I was instantly transported back to the jealousy I had felt a few months ago. I listened as Stephanie told me he had not come for lunch since I was there when he came the first time. I couldn't know that it had been his first time or that he hadn't been back since then. That great green monster had reared his ugly head in my paradise. I controlled myself for the most part, but we acted less close than we had just a few months ago. I found myself looking at the pretty girls at school and wondering. We had quit going to church by this time. After I quit going to church, my ability to bring myself under control was weakened. I began to think more about what if, and I felt myself wanting out of the marriage. Toward the end of the semester, I decided I was going to leave and go to Oklahoma to live. My doubts were overcoming my ability to reason. So I made a plan that I would prepare my clothes or have Stephanie prepare them and leave the Friday school was out. The Friday that I got out of class was about 3, and when I got home, I started loading the car with all of my belongings. I had asked Stephanie that morning to wash and iron all my school clothes. She had done just as I had asked, and they were ready when I got home. I walked into the house and I started putting things into the car. I loaded the trunk first, and Stephanie asked what I was doing. I didn't answer at first. After her asking several times, and I and as I was putting the last of my clothes in the back, I stopped and looked at her and I said simply, "You know what I'm doing and why." I got into the car and I drove off about 5 p.m. that fateful Friday afternoon. I stopped by one of my cousin's places and picked him up to go with me. As I was getting on the freeway, I was sure I had made the right decision. I drove on for about 50 miles in confidence of what I was doing. The next 50 miles brought a great deal of doubt to my wisdom, or to the wisdom of my choices. And when I reached Fresno, about 100 miles from home, I was stricken with the foolishness of what I had done. My heart fell to the bottom of my chest. My stomach ached, and my head began to swim with the realization of not having my Stephanie anymore. Reality is a cruel teacher, and I was in a battle with it then and there. I pulled off of the freeway and turned around and headed back home. It was 7 p.m., and it would be after dark when I got home. I became excited about my change of heart and I started rushing back. My young cousin asked what was going on. I just said I had made a mistake. As I sped through the night to keep saying short prayers, I kept saying short prayers that Stephanie and the kids would be okay, that she would forgive me for being so stupid. That was all I could think about as I moved through the foggy, still darkness. I got to Modesto just after 9 p.m. and dropped my cousin off at his house about 9:30 and was home. And about 9:30 I was home. The lights were off and I ran into the house and there was no one at home. I thought I would pass out from the anxiety that overwhelmed me. My first thought was that she had called Mike and asked to stay with him. Oh, how heavy my soul became at that painful thought. I got the phone and I called Mike's number, and when he answered, I was cautious and at what I would say. I spoke just a little bit of unimportant things before I asked if he had seen Stephanie. He said, "Not that day," and asked why. I just said, "Oh, I got home late and she was gone." Uh, when I hung up the phone, I began to cry, wondering where she could be. I unloaded the car and put my junk up, and I then got into the car and decided to go to mom and dad's for the night. It was about 15 miles, and I thought about where she would be if not at Mike's? Maybe at her mother's house. But I knew she didn't get along with her mother very well. I couldn't think of where she might have gone, and I was broken hearted. I got out of the car and dragged my feet as I walked up to the door. I knocked, and when Dad opened the door, Stephanie was standing at the doorway to the kitchen. My heart leaped within my chest, and I didn't hear a word that Dad was saying in scolding me. I walked over as fast as I could to Stephanie, and I threw my arms around her neck. I began to say, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. As I tried, as I teared up and held her tight, she began to cry also, and we both embraced there as Dad finished up and Mom started in on me. We all went into the kitchen and had a cup of coffee and talked for a long time. We listened to their advice. About 11, we gathered the kids and went back home. When we got home, we put the boys to bed. It seemed the romance had been rekindled in our old stale relationship. Our old stale relationship, but it was the best night we had experienced in months. We were rededicated to each other. So there was some good came from what I meant for bad. God works wonders with all we do if we allow Him in. We set ourselves to the other needs, and our love grew beyond what it had been. Mom and Dad decided to take a vacation to Oklahoma that summer, and I talked Stephanie into going with them in our car and seeing all my family. She agreed, and we started getting ready for the trip. By this time, I had my driver's license taken by the state for failure to pay. It was that paper that I signed at the insurance company of the lady I hit in the multiple car crash I was involved with a few months ago. I had to send my license to the DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles, California. But I was very careful and obeyed all the laws, and I kept my car legal in every way. In doing so, I stood little chance of being stopped. So I would not have to show my driver's license. That didn't worry me as we made ready for vacation. We were all going through Colorado and into Kansas to see Dad's oldest sister and her family. I didn't know her or her family very well. We also seen Uncle Sam, Dad's baby brother. I love Uncle Sam and had a good time there. I also wanted to see the relatives in Oklahoma. Mom's sister, Aunt Helen, and her kids were my dearest friends as a youngster. As we started the trip, I traveled with Mom and Dad as we traveled through Nevada and Utah. But when we came to Colorado, I got in a hurry, and when we crossed the Great Divide, I began to move out far ahead of them. I was doing the speed limit when a Colorado Highway Patrol turned on his lights and I was caught. I just knew I was caught. I just knew. I told Stephanie that I would probably go to jail. I pulled to the shoulder, and then I thought I had better pull off of the road further. So If I go to jail, the car would not be towed. I pulled over to the fence line and shut off the car and waited for the officer to arrest me. Stephanie and I were both scared. We believed the trip would end right here for us. The officer followed me all the way to the fence road and got out of his patrol car and walked up to the driver's side window. He asked to see my driver's license. I looked at him and I said, I don't have my license. I stopped at a quick stop when I came into Colorado and someone stole my wallet. My license was in it. The officer asked if I had reported it stolen. I replied, I did, but I was told that I probably would never get it back. He said, that was most likely true. And did I have the money to get where I was going? I said, my folks sent me the money to get there. He apologized for his state and told me to be careful as I went. As I asked why he had stopped me, and he said, I had a license plate light burned out. I stopped at the first station and replaced it there. I got to Uncle Sam's house first, and Stephanie and I visited for a good hour and a half before they got there. We had a wonderful time talking about the time Stephanie and I had spent there when we were first married. Now we had two sons with us. We spent 2 days there before we went to Oklahoma. When we started to head to Muskogee, I pulled out first and got on the expressway, and the speed limit on it was 100 miles per hour. The new highway was opened only a month earlier, and the speed limit was an experiment. It was reduced to 80 miles an hour within a month. As I sped down the expressway, I ran 100 miles per hour, and in about 15 minutes, my car overheated and boiled over. We sat on the side of the road until Dad came upon us and helped us get the water we needed to get started again. It seemed that the car's engine had been bored out to the maximum width for larger pistons. It made the car a hot rod, but it didn't like to be run at high speed for long periods of because the radiator had not been enlarged for the extra coolant needed. We followed Mom and Dad from there on until we got back to California. We arrived in Muskogee and stayed at Aunt Helen's house, and Stephanie got to meet Aunt her got to meet Harriet for the first time. She liked Harriet, and they got along very well. The second night there, a great electric storm came through. I had seen them before, but it was the first one for Stephanie. The electric storm made a bolt of lightning one or two or three times within 5 seconds. They lit up the night almost like daytime. The thunder is deafening, and there is usually a lot of rain with a storm like that. Stephanie was frightened, and she held on to me with all her strength. It made me feel like a defender of the fairer sex. I liked it quite a lot. The storm must have lasted 2 hours, and when it subdued or subsided, it had cooled off by about 30 degrees. We stayed for 3 more days before we started back to California. The trip back was uneventful. When we started passing through the Mojave Desert, it was unbearably hot. My car didn't have air conditioning. It was so hot, we got a tub and put 2 blocks of ice in it and we opened the floor vent on Stephanie's side and the back windows on the driver's side, and it cooled the car to a decent temperature. As we got back to Modesto, I knew we would have to move because I had spent the rent money on the vacation. We moved to Turlock, where I could get a smaller duplex for about half the money, and I attended one more semester of school. It took so much gas to drive to Modesto every day that Stephanie and I got into several arguments. Those 3 months, I told her I wanted to move to Colorado, and she agreed, and we made our plans. I didn't like to tell that story because it shows the foolishness of young people, but I hope you enjoyed it. It kind of brought tears to my eyes since Stephanie has been passed now for 7 years, or almost seven. And I think her and I would have laughed about it if I had read it right now in front of her. She was a good, caring woman. If you get in a hurry to hear the next story, which is, let me turn over here, moving on. This is our first 15 years was really quite eventful because we were young and foolish. But if you get in a hurry to see that, you can go to my web page or my Facebook page and find a link to Amazon, and you can get the ebook or the paperback and be able to continue to read. If you get the paperback, I think you get an ebook with it, and if you do, then you can start reading it on an e-reader, but you would end up with the paperback in the mail eventually. Uh, like my channel, that's what helps make it possible for me to be up on YouTube, and subscribe to it. You'll get these uh, chapters sent to you when I post them, or at least a notification that there. Hit the bell, and it'll let you know when I post one a few days ahead, like, and they'll call them premieres, and it'll let you know when that's going to be there. Share it with your friends. You think they would enjoy hearing uh, the story of a young man and a baby bride as we learn how to live. God bless you and take care of you and keep you. And we ask that if you like what I'm doing, share it with your friends.